So how did all this happen? Picking up and starting your own journey?
Well, it started when we actually moved to London. When we moved to London, we started to realize that traveling around Europe was so cheap and it was very quick to do compared to living in the US, where I think a lot of Americans get caught in the trap of finding one beach destination like Cancun or the Dominican Republic and then going there every single year.
That's because they bought a timeshare and they got to make good use of it.
Exactly. But then when we were living in London, we realized that it cost $40, $50 to take a round trip flight to go 2, 3, 4 hours to places like Italy, Croatia, Spain, things like that.
You know, Ryanair.
Exactly.
EasyJet.
So we don't prefer those airlines at all.
So what airlines do you fly? Like for people who are trying to travel around the European region that want those cheaper tickets, what airline would you fly outside of Ryan or EasyJet? Because those are the first ones that come to mind.
I mean, EasyJet isn't bad, but British Airways is a good one only because it includes your bag always. And with the other ones, it doesn't include anything at all. So you have to account for that as well.
Gotcha. You got the bug to start traveling the world from your experience of relocating to London and having so many countries at your disposal that you're like, hey, this is what I want to do forever?
Correct. Well, you know, we enjoyed the travel. We could pretty much do it anytime. And one of the consistent things that we've noticed was that every time we were leaving a new city or a new country, we would always say, man, I wish we could stay longer.
Yeah.
And for European trips, you know, we would be away for 3 days or 4 days or 5 days, and we wouldn't get to see as much of the city as we would want to. And every time we would come back to London, we would be back in our flat and say, why are we here?
What's a flat? I'm just messing with you because as someone from, I'm sure that was one of the things that you were experiencing. Like we call them apartments and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But now you've been converted to calling apartments flats.
We
Well,
lived there for 5 years. It comes with the territory.
Gotcha. Now, this leg that you're on now is obviously not the European tour. How did you go from your routine job, because that's why you relocated to London?
yes.
A job opportunity. How did you transition from kind of still working within that rat race to now being a full-time traveler?
So when 2020 hit, when we were pretty much locked down, I think the UK probably had one of the most severe lockdowns, especially compared to the US. So in the UK, we were pretty much fully locked down for an entire year and a half without any breaks. So we had nothing to look forward to. We had no vacations that we could take. And we were sort of sitting there just wondering, why are we working so hard to not be able to go travel and to go do anything? So the visa that we had was coming to an end, and we decided, are we going to stay here and continue to do this while we're still in lockdown? Or are we going to actually start to pursue what we want to do and start traveling full-time and documenting it?
Really? I didn't know that it was the pandemic that pushed you guys to kind of go over the edge. Just for the record, you know, we all went to college together. These are people I've known for and high school.
Yeah.
These are people I've known for decades. So I didn't even know that it was kind of being the cabin fever that got you to really say, F this, we got to do something else. That's what it was.
I think it was that and just being away from family and just not doing anything at all for that entire time.
How long do you think you're gonna keep this going? Like, is there like a target date? Like, we're gonna do this up until 2025, or you're gonna try to ride this for as long as you can?
So we started this last year in July, and we had a target of doing this for about 2 years. We're having so much fun, we're kind of just winging it at this point.
The natural kind of thought for most people in America, and probably most people in the world, is if you're going to move to a new country, uproot your life, you're going to separate yourself from your family, you're going to have to learn new customs, potentially languages, etc. Those are some of the anxiety points. But I think usually the top consideration is, well, what are you going to do for money? How are you funding this lifestyle?
Yeah, so from working a corporate job, we've had a lot of savings that helped us to get started with it. And then now we're using some of that savings to get into some of our own business projects, such as e-commerce. We're trying to build up our social media and our YouTube to make money from there, as well as some other investments that we have.
Cool. What would you say is like the average monthly cost to support the life?
It kind of depends on the country at this point, but I think...
So Guatemala, I want to say was about between $750 to $800
For the month.
for the month.
And that was lodging, food,
Transportation.
transportation,
And activities.
local entertainment.
Yeah.
And do you feel that you were actively trying to be frugal or similar lifestyle that you're accustomed to?
I think since that was in the beginning
Yeah.
of the trip, we kind of were a little bit more free with just trying to enjoy ourselves. But then more recently, we started to stick to a budget to make sure that we knew what were the outgoings.
So $800 for two people
Yeah.
for a month, right? You know, you think about the cost of living in New York and of course the cost of living in freaking London, that's like unheard of.
It's a fraction of the cost.
Was it surprising to you to see how inexpensive it was? Like your family's from the Philippines, your family's from the Dominican Republic, and the cost of living there is less than it is in the United States. But I feel like, especially DR is kind of dollarized in a way where things are expensive.
Yeah.
Philippines, not so much so the case. But was it surprising to you that here in the Americas you could find like the cost of living to be so low?
I think we knew that it was going to be inexpensive, but we didn't realize that we could actually maintain a life or an extended period of time living in the countries that we visited.
Yeah, for me, the first time coming into South America was to Peru. And I was surprised by the quality of life versus the spend. Like, you've been to Peru, Miraflores?
No, not yet.
Okay. So Miraflores is a city that's, well, not a city, it's a part of the city of Lima that's built onto the coast. Everything is new. And since it's new and designed after, like with good planning, like it's a combination of beach, park, high-rise condos, and probably the best restaurants. It's like this pocket of Lima.
Wow.
But just like in Medellin, everything is about a third of what it would cost you in the United States. Like you go to a restaurant, a beer is going to run you $2 rather than 9, 8.
Yeah.
Right? As it would in the States for like an equal level restaurant. But the experience is the same. And then the housing is a third of the price. Everything's a third of the price. But it feels very much like a modern American city. And that's what was surprising to me because I'm so used to, like you said, the American experience going to Cancun, going to DR, settling on a resort, all the prices being adjusted to the American tourist. And then outside of those regions being kind of lopsided as far as infrastructure is concerned, I thought all of South America was like that. And I was pleasantly surprised to see that you could come to cities in South America and not lose the creature comforts that you have grown accustomed to in a bigger city. So earlier we were talking about your first impressions of Medellin, and this is your first time in a larger South American city.
Yes.
What are your first thoughts?
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Why?
I would live here. It has all of the luxuries that we would want for a fraction of the cost.
Such as?
Well, hot water is the number one. Everywhere we're just looking for hot water. But just, high-rise buildings with a doorman, a gym inside of a building, you're paying almost nothing a month to live there compared to the U.S. for something that we would pay, almost $2,000 a month for?
Yeah, coming from both New York City and London, when we got used to all of the fine dining, the
Yeah.
amazing restaurants all over the place, the nightlife, just that big city hustle and bustle. And you can find that here without having to pay ridiculous prices just to live in the middle of it all.
Yeah, like I live in what's like the Poblada area, and it's probably one of the most expensive areas in the city. My 2-bedroom apartment, doorman, doesn't have a pool because it's like a smaller complex. It's not like a large complex, so we don't have a pool. But gym, the typical newer condominium features. I'm paying $650 for a 2-bedroom apartment, and it's
Wow.
like atypical in space distribution to most apartments here, and it's $650 a month. And it's like you can't even find. I don't think you can even rent rooms in New York
No?
at that price anymore.
No.
Just a room.
I think 5 people put into one apartment in New York City and they're all paying $1,200 each.
Yeah, that's
With no walls.
that's totally possible. If they want an equivalent building, like you want a nicer 1-bedroom or a nicer 2-bedroom, similar building, rent might hit you for $5-6 grand
Yeah.
in New York City. For the equivalent of what you get here, walking distance to where the nightlife is, where the top restaurants are. To me, that experience in Lima is probably the same experience that you had coming here, where it's
Yeah.
like, wait a second, this is the first time that I can honestly say I feel comfortable in a city out of America that I wouldn't think I would feel as comfortable, and it's so freaking cheap that I was just like, nah.
Yeah.
It completely shifted my mentality on what my life was going to be. And it made it even more tangible because it's like, I always say it, coming to South America is very familiar to me as an American because all of it is developed post-colonialism, right? So it has the same sort of, everybody's an immigrant to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm.
It's a mixing of people, and everything is built in the past 300 years. So it has like the same sort of feel as a North American city, and but enough of a cultural difference that you get to feel like you're not in America. Like comparing the United States to Canada, for instance. You go from New York City to Toronto, all you get is more cold, right? But it's more or less the same vibe, the same sort of thing. You don't really get much of a cultural exchange. What country is next on the list?
Ecuador.
Ecuador. Why?
We're kind of just following the route. So Ecuador would be the cheapest to fly to from here. So that also depends on where we're going next.
And Ecuador used to actually be part of Colombia. Mm-hmm. Like Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela was one country.
Yeah.
That's why the flag is virtually the same. But yeah, so I'm kind of curious to see how, I haven't been to Ecuador, so I'm curious to see through your channel how Ecuador varies from Colombia and how much it's similar.
Yeah.
And like how did the countries kind of divide and become their own thing? Really curious as to how that goes. Are you going to just continue bouncing around South America? Or are you looking to kind of take bigger hops in between like each destination? Like logically it makes sense to go from Colombia to Ecuador. But do you think, hey, I think our next trip is going to be in the Pacific Islands or New Zealand or something like that? Like how are you sorting through where you go to next?
I think one of the top reasons why we started off in Central America and then made our way down to South America was because we were also waiting for Asia to open up its doors.
Yes.
So I'm overdue for a trip to the Philippines, and I've been promising my entire family that I was going to take her and introduce her to the rest of the family. So as soon as Asia opens up its doors, I think that's going to be one of the destinations that we go to next.
Okay, cool. So speaking about those same kind of hesitation points that I think most people reference, what sort of feedback did you get from friends and family when you said, I think we're gonna do this?
I mean, there was a lot of hesitation, a lot of negative feedback, but then there was also the positive feedback. I think we travel normally, so for us, it didn't seem like that big of a leap.
But what sort of feedback were you getting?
Yeah, there was a lot of resistance
Yeah.
on, well, what are you going to do for
Work.
And what happens when you guys start a family, and where are they going to be raised, and where are they going to go to school? When are you going to come back? And you need to look forward to going back to work and getting on a structured schedule and things like that.
Did you feel like when you were getting that feedback, like maybe since there's so many people citing the same kind of pain points or fear points that I'm doing something crazy?
Not at
No.
all. Not at all.
No.
If anything, we were kind of looking at them like,
Open up your box.
yeah, it's time to really open up your eyes and see why this is probably going to be very, very good for us, and why a lot of people should be looking into doing the same and chasing their own dreams.
Yeah, like what? How do you want to work for the next 40 years?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then start your traveling and seeing the world when you have arthritis, diabetes,
Exactly.
chronic heart disease, and everything else. And then you can't even spend more than 2 weeks away from your doctor because you might fall apart.
Right.
Right? I have those same conversations with people because we're so conditioned in this US. And I think a lot of, maybe the English colonies are like that, where it's more about work, like work first, and then personal leisure is the byproduct of work. I would say that's more of an English colony thing, because if you go to Spain, which is right, across the channel, they're not thinking like that. Right? And you actually see that here in South America. You see it like that. Yeah, work is to pay the bills and enjoy life. Not anything. That's all it's for. Like, we only do that because when we need to. But the American way, and people who are kind of structured in that environment often think anything outside of that is dangerous, career setback, crazy, right? So I try to talk to people from the lens or from the perspective of, I think what we're doing in America is kind of crazy because we limit our experiences so much. And I can imagine the things that you guys are experiencing, seeing, and how it's shaping you as people, right? I remember there's a quote that I read, or something that I think it's something that I read, that said people are just a collection of the impressions that they've had. Whatever they've seen, heard, tasted is who they are. So if you don't maximize your impressions, then what are you?
I like
Right?
that.
So I can only imagine someone who's saying, I'm committed to seeing the world and for what it is and having my own experience with it, what sort of impact that leaves on you as people. And what has that been like for you? Like, is there anything that you've started to experience or see since you started this that made you maybe reanalyze certain concepts that were raised with?
It's funny because I had a conversation with Ricardo just the other day, and I was telling him that I used to think that stress was normal. I used to think that it was okay to be feeling like my chest was being pressed on, and that I had to do certain things at certain times, and deadlines they had to be hit, or else it would be the end of the world. And then when we started traveling and started to be a little bit more free, we really just noticed that stress was not normal. It didn't need to be there. And seeing a lot of people, especially here in Colombia, there's a very laid-back attitude. And the laid-back attitude leads to feeling a lot more free and feeling like you're enjoying life rather than stressing to try to get to the weekend, or stressing to accomplish certain things that will only help you for a very limited period of time.
When looking at that stress point, because I'm kind of someone who's been pushing on life for a while, I often forget how to relax. I actually get a little anxious if I don't have that stressor, or that pressure to wake up, get somewhere, have things structured and planned. Like, even though I like to live without plans, like I don't like sticking to a freaking calendar, it drives me crazy, but my life depends on it. Since that anxiety, like that motivational anxiety was built into your identity, when you started to take your foot off the gas, what was that like? And how did you cope with like slowing down?
It felt good. I think my foot has been on the gas for, at this point, close to 20 years, where it was just go, go, go all the time. And being able to just take a step back and look up and see the world that was around us and be able to just really enjoy the little things, it felt good. And it feels good.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, we've been here in Medellin now for 2 weeks. And we've been staying in the La Royales area, and we went to Guatapé, and even going to Guatapé for 4 days felt like a vacation from our, I don't want to say our day-to-day routine, but from what we've been doing. It's not always a vacation every single day. We have to work. We do have a little bit of a schedule that we stick to in order to get things done. However, being able to just unwind in Guatapé, it felt like a mini vacation from our extended vacation.
Yeah, that's a very common feeling here in Medellin, and a very common part of the culture in this city. People will go to the countryside every weekend. If they have the means, that's like escape the city, go to one of the small towns, and kind of reconnect with nature again. And even if you're like, for people who haven't been here, if you could actually look out the window, this is a city kind of built into jungles and mountain terrain.
Yeah.
So it's very lush, very green. And then when you go outside of the city, it's only that, right? It's quite relaxing and fascinating. But it also speaks to how comfortable it is in Guatapé. Because I get that same like feeling when I'm there, like I completely separated from everything else, and almost a moment to reflect and think about my life and work to life balance and that sort of thing. So to hear you guys who are full-time travelers, I would say,
Yeah.
to say that felt like a point of disconnecting kind of speaks to that little slice of the greater Medellin area. Just the other day, I had a consultation with a gentleman who he told me flat out, look, I booked this consultation because I need to get out of the United States and I just need to game plan for it. And he wants to talk through what that process is like. He's like, I've been thinking about Central America or Colombia. Oftentimes in those conversations, the how to fund the life is the main topic of conversation. So now that you guys are committed to this concept, how did you actually get started, and like what was the first step that you took to actually detach yourself from that rat race?
Sure. So in the UK, managing a sales team, I started to do some one-on-one consulting with younger sales professionals who were looking to get into corporate sales. And I started doing a lot of weekly consultations with those guys, and I had a little bit of a client base where I started to notice that the money that I was making from that was actually enough to fund a lot of the vacations that we were taking in Europe. And when we decided to leave the corporate world, I was maintaining the consultation that I was doing and traveling to places in Central America and South America where it's a lot less expensive to live there. Starting with those consultations helped to push us forward with the trip. And then we started taking on some other projects.
So you took your life's work, packaged it into consulting, and that allowed you to kind of maintain whatever schedule you wanted while earning. And to consult, you don't necessarily need to be on site for most clients. So if somebody were thinking about doing the same, would you advise them to try to set up some sort of consultancy business?
I think it's a great thing to start, especially if it's something that you have an expertise in and all you need to really share is your experience. Especially seeing it from the other side of the chair. You You can help advise somebody which direction to go, how to make certain decisions within their own career, and basically be a mentor for them as they're looking to build their own experience.
And how did you actually get in front of potential customers, right? That's usually a lot of people's thought, like how do I build a customer base if I'm going to just start consulting?
Sure. So being in the sales industry pretty much since I was 16 years old, and I worked my way to become a manager in the UK, some of the people who actually approached me were the candidates that I interviewed that didn't end up getting the job. They came back to me asking, what could I have done better? What can I do moving forward to make sure that I land that next job that I interview for? So it started that way, and then I started to put messages out on LinkedIn and put some of the tidbits that I was giving these guys, I would put them into posts on LinkedIn.
So you first were just getting approached by people in the space that were like, hey, this didn't work out for me. Can you help me? And then you just decided to start putting content out there for free to tell people, yeah, this is how you need to handle this.
Correct.
Was it ever with the intention of it leading to future clients, or did it end up leading to future clients and you realize, wait a second, this is a great way to capture customers?
Exactly. So it didn't start off that way. It was putting the content out there. Actually, it was a little bit selfish in the event that I wanted to move on to a director type role or some sort of senior manager role. I could have a little piece of my resume that was already on LinkedIn showing that I was giving out this valuable content. And then as people started to approach me, I started to think, well, this is something that I could probably do a little bit more frequent and make some additional income that way.
So when you started to look at starting this part of your life, you mentioned that you were like, hey, I'm making enough money from consultations. Did you start sorting through places based on, okay, I'm earning X dollars from consultations and I know I can keep that up regardless of where I am? Were you sorting by cost of living to what you're earning?
No, I think it was the other way around. We decided which places do we want to actually visit, and then calculate how many consultations or how many clients I would need to have on board in order to maintain a life there.
Did you ever come across any kind of visa restrictions or visa limitations? Like I'll get people who reach out to me from South America, from Africa, and unfortunately due to how the world is designed, they would say things like, well, I would love to go to Italy to buy one of these cheaper homes, but I can't even get in. Is there any place that you've had some sort of difficulty kind of crossing the borders or getting in for any reason, or due to American residency, you've been able to have like freedom of exchange of wherever it is that you're going?
It's been pretty easy. The only restriction that we have is as American citizens, we can't be out of the country for more than the 6 months at a time on a travelers, as travelers.
So even if so the biggest hurdle that you're coming across is if you really liked being in Medellin and saying, okay, we're going to make this the home base or live in the city, you then have to figure out how can you obtain long-term residency.
Correct.
Right.
But you haven't had any other difficulty getting in and out of any country that you wanted to see.
No. I think as Americans, we're privileged that way.
Yeah. It's something I've actually spoken to before. Like, Americans have a pretty good deal, especially for those who don't feel like their country is home for them. We got pretty good access to credit. You could earn in US dollars remotely at this point if you have a skill set that you could monetize over the internet. And you can go anywhere you want. So I tell people all the time, if you're dissatisfied with your life in the United States, you have everything that you need to pick up and try somewhere else. Is that advice that you would give to anybody?
To pick up and go somewhere else? Absolutely. Why wouldn't you do it? If it's more cost effective, you're happier outside of the US. At least for us, we're definitely happier outside of the US. Why not just go and be free?
What brings you more happiness outside of the US than being in the US?
I don't quite know, But I think it's just, the fact that we're living our lives the way that we want to, we're exploring, we're learning new cultures, and I think that makes us happy.
I think definitely the cost of exploring.
Well, that
is
too.
is a very, very big factor.
Yeah.
Cool. Because like for me, I don't know, the U.S. is in many ways a diverse country because it's a country just totally full of immigrants. But it also seems to be lacking, like, I can't say that it's lacking culture because we have our own culture in the United States. But maybe because the country is so freaking large that you don't get much variation in change from one city to the next. It almost feels like the same. Every city you go to, especially if you go to the suburbs, it looks the same. The street looks the same, the traffic signs are the same, maybe the trees change, depending on where you are, but everything else looks the same. And I get a kick out of like being uncomfortable in a new place and not really knowing the language and trying to make new friends. And I don't know, there's a little bit of that excitement in me. Who do you think this is for? Like really, like we would all love to say this is something that everybody in the world should do. Really uproot themselves from the place that they're living in to kind of see more, experience more. But who is this lifestyle really best suited for?
It's a tough one because I think it's for everyone. If you really want to get out there and do it, I think it can be for everyone. What do you think?
I think at first glance, it's for anybody who's really feeling stagnant in their current routine. Anybody who feels like they want to see more of what life is about. But then also going back to what Denise said, it really is for anybody who wants to just give it a shot. I think at the very minimum, trying it and seeing what the experience is like at the very minimum is for everybody. And there's going to be a lot of people who get that kick and say, I need to see more. I want to see more.
And there's going to be people who actually will get the answer that that's not for them too.
Absolutely.
Right? And never have to deal with like, maybe if I was 10 years younger, I could travel the world. Maybe they tried it like, nah, I like to be at my office job.
Yeah.
Right? Like I prefer that than this. Like I'm sure there's people who will feel that way and say, I like the consistency, the certainty, the structure of my environment. And I don't want to change that too much. And at least they could get that off their list and say, yeah, I'm over that. I don't need to think about it.
Yeah,
And
I tried
kind
it.
of ruminate and resent they're not trying. We have obviously some mutual friends. I've been trying to convince some of these guys to make the leap. These are frequent travelers too, so it's not like they're afraid of leaving the United States. I've been trying to convince them to just go full out and break from it. Ricardo is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is, and this is for you, Ricardo, if you're watching this. What do you think holds people back like that? I think it's the same sort of thing, like the uncertainty, the financial risk. What are people going to think? Am I giving up too much? That's like the golden handcuffs that we have.
Sure.
Like I got things are pretty good for me here, and nobody wants to risk that. What do you think it is?
It's the fear of the unknown.
But he's not that fearful of the unknown things. It's a very
Ricardo,
weird thing
yeah.
because he's very open, but he's still somehow committed, right? Like I'm really trying to understand like what it is about the people who do it, because in these travels you've met other people who've made the same decision, right? And they all, whenever I meet them, they all kind of are the same way. Maybe slightly impulsive, maybe like non-traditionalist. They almost feel like they're the same sort of person. So I'm just trying to understand myself too. It's like if I could typecast who this is for and really talk to them and be the catalyst that pushes them kind of over the edge, I just want to be able to identify them and speak directly to them rather than speaking to people that are going to give like resistance to that.
Sure. I think there's a security blanket effect there where, it's the same bed that they're going to be going back to, their car that they drive on a
The hot
regular
water.
basis.
Hot water, yes.
Their favorite taco place that they go to around the corner of their house. And I think that sense of security is what keeps them from being able to potentially take that leap.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can't quite put my finger on it because most of the time I'm guilty of thinking most people think like me. So when I meet people who don't think like me, I'm like, what? Like, how do you think that way? Why don't you see it the same way as me? And it's kind of annoying to people when I'm like that. So I don't want to annoy people, and I want to make sure that I motivate the right people. So I was kind of just wanted your input on that. What have been some of the negatives that you've experienced in this? Like, it can't be all roses and sunshine.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess being foreigners, sometimes some locals don't like it, but then you have to remember that you are in their home and just respect their values and things like that.
Yeah, we get spotted very quickly.
Yeah.
So, but how is that good and how is that bad?
Well,
It's bad when they treat you badly.
and when they want to charge you the American prices.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Or when they talk really bad about you and don't know that you actually can understand them, kind of a thing.
And does that happen with great frequency, or is it a kind of an infrequent thing?
It happens a lot.
Really?
Yeah. It depends on the country. For example, in Guatemala, it happened more than what we thought it was gonna happen. But they had no idea I spoke Spanish, so they would speak amongst themselves in Spanish, and then I wouldn't tell them that I'm understanding them, because then I would wait and just be like, I think we should find someone else to give us a ride to where we're going, or just whatever it was.
Do you have a specific example? Because I'm kind of curious. Because I wonder if something like that would bother me, or I'd be like, man, I experienced the same BS in the U.S. So I'm kind of curious.
But that's the thing, you do experience it everywhere you go too. So what happened in Guatemala? We had a couple of things happen in Guatemala.
I think being interracial gets us spotted really quickly. Not only interracial, but not being from that particular country, we just get spotted pretty fast.
Yeah.
But in terms of negatives, day 3 of our journey in Mexico, we were taking a family trip. So we loaded up the van. We had all of the luggage and the suitcases on top of the van. And about an hour down the highway at 5:30 in the morning, we got stopped by what looked to be a police car, and we ended up getting robbed at gunpoint.
Okay.
For everything.
All suitcases, all
the
luggage?
suitcases,
They left the
they left the
suitcases,
suitcases alone.
but they took our jewelry, they took bags, like purses.
We threw our cell phones under the
Phones.
seats, but the one person who was right in front of the window, we're right next to the window, they got his phone.
Gotcha. And that, to me, is quite typical when there's economic
Yeah.
gaps, especially on routes that are known to be highly trafficked by
Right.
tourists. Obviously, that's a negative experience. Day number 3, right? For some
Day
people,
3.
that would be like, I think,
We considered.
I think God is telling me something. Yeah. I think I'm going back to London. But you didn't take that step to kind of backtrack on the idea. But looking back at one of those negative experiences, is there anything that you think you could have done differently that would have offset that, or do you kind of just chuck it up to like, this is a part of life, and at times crappy things are going to happen?
I mean, when you travel full time, things like that will happen. I mean, you could go through it a million times, and we could have done some things differently. But I think the most important thing is that we learned from it, and we learned what to do moving forward in situations like that.
What adjustments would you recommend?
So now we do carry our valuables hidden in like a pouch on our bodies at all times. So if something like that were to happen, we just pass up the dummy wallet. So that's something that we incorporated into our travels, and our passports and our money and things like that are actually put away where no one knows actually where it is. But you have the dummy wallet, so you think that is all the money that we do have.
Gotcha.
As much as possible, we try not to be in transit in the middle of the night
Yeah.
or extremely early in the day where it's still dark, so that there's a lot more cars on the road.
Yeah, you try thinking, okay, we're going to beat traffic, right?
That's exactly what it was.
We're going to beat traffic,
Yeah.
but for someone who's a career criminal, that's like cops are kind of chilling.
Yeah.
Nobody else is around to even
Yeah.
kind of spot who is the one that is doing the crime. So I guess you have to kind of start thinking like a criminal and maneuver
Yeah.
in a way. Oh yeah, I got a dummy wallet that has enough to satisfy them.
Exactly.
And like, all right, cool. Here's the $100 tariff, and whatever, man. Move on. I'm cool with that. The burner phone. Like, oh, you want
Yeah.
my $50 Android phone? Not the phone. Not the phone. But cool, man. That it's unfortunate you had to have that experience, but I think for viewers who are comfortable in the United States, there's people who come to New York City and have that same exact experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was on the subway and they snatched my iPhone. I was in Times Square and somebody pickpocketed me. Like, these are typical experiences of any traveler who kind of puts their guard down because they're having a good time. Anything else that you might have experienced that may be off-putting? The reason why I'm kind of asking these questions is because there's a real cost to the change, right? And I don't want people to kind of fall in love with all the positive imagery that we put out on social media, because we tend to highlight the good. Is there anything else that people who are thinking about making this voyage on their own should consider prior to making the change and be kind of mentally prepared for?
It's really about understanding the surroundings, doing the necessary legwork ahead of time and researching where it is that you're going. And as much as we want to be exploring and just going anywhere we want to, we have to know what are some of the boundaries. Where is it that these are no-go areas, and then others which you're free to just walk around.
How do you research that?
I think just going online, looking at blogs, looking at experiences of other people, and even some locals would say, feel free to go in this area, but be careful if you go 2 blocks down and you're on this street. It's not the safest for anybody to be carrying a camera around.
Are there any particular blogs or groups that you feel are great resources for that information, or is it kind of just what Google spits back at you with your keyword search?
Yeah, I think it's what Google says, and people who are in the top few searches and will always look up crime rates and safety, or even places to avoid in certain neighborhoods. Even though from time to time we do like to venture in and see what the fuss is about, which she might kill me sometimes about. But
so you intentionally will target out and say, let's see if this is really as bad as they say.
I enjoy going into the thick of markets.
He does. I do not.
I absolutely love markets. The food markets that go into the clothing markets, and being able to see, what people are buying, and just being able to get things for myself. But then we get to a point where she says, I think we have to turn around now.
Yeah, when the locals start talking about you in their language and start pointing you out, it's time to turn around, kind of a thing.
Gotcha. And you pick up on that and you're like,
Yeah. It's time to go.
We're looking like the easy pickings out here.
Yeah.
Whether it may not necessarily be because you're being spotted for crime, but it's like, well, that's the person you need to try to sell this carpet to, because
They're different.
they're gonna be willing to pay $100 for this $10 thing. Last year I sold one like that. Like it's that sort of thing. It's you're an opportunity. So I get it. Like, one thing that I say is, if your cell phone it's 2 months or 3 months the average salary, that's going to be highly desirable for someone, right? So it's like you can't walk around thinking, like, you may not think about that because it may be readily available or it's not 2 months of your salary, but you got the latest iPhone, it's $1,200 or $1,300. that is, food for the family, food for myself, grandma's medicine, all their problems solved by just brandishing a knife. So like that's, to me, that is almost like winning a little bit of the lottery of if the right gringo walks past you and
Sure.
you're willing to rob him. It's like it's kind of understandable to me in a certain way. So when I'm in different countries, I almost condition myself to think if you get robbed here, you're just paying the tax that you should pay and keep it moving. And hope maybe you really help somebody out. Like that could be someone's real life, that I've got a sick grandma and I don't want to see her go. And it becomes a crime, so I kind of chuck it up to that. Now, you've been cultivating your own social media presence, right? Or your own social media brand. How would you characterize your channel?
Travel, food, lifestyle, and just being with us on the journey.
And has there been, do you feel that you found your voice yet? And like how you want to deliver information?
Not at all.
I think we're trying to get there.
I think
we're still figuring it out.
We're really trying to figure it out. We're fine-tuning pretty much every single day and figuring out what people enjoy seeing.
How frequently are you putting out content?
On a daily basis on
Instagram,
social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok, and
Twitter.
Yep, and then on YouTube weekly basis, trying to get that up, trying to get more content to make that more like 2 or 3 times a week.
Where are you doing your best? Because I feel like I don't understand Instagram as a consumer, and I don't understand it as a creator. What out of all those platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook naturally is like a byproduct of that, YouTube, like where do you think you actually are hitting the best and like understand the best?
So I think it works well for us because he's really good at the YouTube and I'm pretty good at Instagram. So we have both of those going for us. The rest we're trying to figure it out. But for now, I think those two.
We're slowly starting to see how the YouTube algorithm works and what type of content and thumbnails and things like that will work to get the views and to get the likes. Denise has slowly started to master the Instagram engagement, and we see both of those probably as the top social media platforms for us.
Yeah, my world is YouTube. I can't navigate. I can't navigate Instagram. I kind of don't like Instagram. I'm like, what's happening here? I can't get into it at all. I feel like I do a better job telling a story on YouTube. But learning the algorithm, like for a lot of people who start creating on YouTube could be lonely in the beginning, and it's a lot of work to put something out, right? And you're like, all right, I'm out here in the world, I'm doing something incredible. Put out your video, 8 views. Like, what did I do wrong? Am I not entertaining? And then you start trying to be like somebody else who's entertaining, and it's not. Oh man. So I know what you're going through, but I think when you're creating for a platform, it's best to create for the one that you consume the best, because it's almost like your language, right? The way that you like to get entertainment from social media is kind of how you can put it out as well. So if you're hitting on Instagram in your YouTube world, I think that's pretty dope. And when somebody is following you, what can they expect to see, and what do you want them to get out of your feed?
Sure. So specifically for YouTube, we want it to feel like you're sitting at the table with us. We want it to feel like you're having that meal with us and that you're on this journey with us.